Okie dokie, folks. We are up above that lower viewpoint we were at, where we were looking at stumps and some of the understory vegetation. This is the long cut harvest that we just did this past year, and you can see up here as well, we've got a 6 foot tall elderberry, 6 foot tall devil's club, which tells me this is a wet area here too, which we're going to talk about a little bit here about the stabilization of this road cut and some road maintenance issues. As you can potentially see up there, it looks like the ditch has been compromised. But also whenever you're looking up kind of at a unit like this, it's a lot easier to see sometimes the stumps that I've been talking about, and using them to kind of give you a chronology of the stand, when it was cut, how many times it was cut, etc. And so here we've got these fresh stumps right in front of us here, and then behind us we have old growth stump there and an old growth stump there, and then you can see them, they almost have little hairdos of ericaceous species, red huckleberry and stuff popping out of the tops of them. The old growth stumps. The new stumps are cut quite closer to the ground because of the way we mechanically cut this with a feller buncher. You can get really close to the ground, whereas the older stumps, of course, and you can see one back here by one of the trees that we left for this unit back there, is cut, you know, it's about a 6 foot tall stump or so. So that's one good indicator, plus just the size. But so this tells me that this unit has been cut only once before, and this time that we just cut it now is the second harvest. So this was second growth. And again, you can see the remnants of the stand that was here before, and these large leaf tree groups that we've left, and which help retain the soil structure and the soil biology in them, so that it will help on the edges. You know, we are impacting to some degree the soil biology here by this disturbance through both, you know, the mechanical disturbance of the feller buncher and the shovel and whatnot that we're using to harvest, up kind of mixing up the soil, compacting the soil in some places, but also just the temperature now that is being experienced. The temperature change in the soil is quite different than it was when this was covered by all the second growth forest, which is right down here. You can see this is the riparian area with that fish stream that we have protected now with this 187 foot buffer on either side. And we did also a little bit of thinning on this too, which is good in many ways. Like I said before, we're trying to not only get revenue for the trust, but also we're trying to accelerate old growth structure and old growth habitat sooner. So that's a double benefit that we get out of that, those late rotational thinnings. And it is a gorgeous clear day. You can see the Olympic Mountains back there, and if these trees weren't in the way, we could probably see Seattle, and then Mount Rainier is over there. We saw that when we were just down there. So real quickly here, I want to talk about the stability of this bank, and again, use these examples as kind of mini landslides basically until we get to see some like larger ones. But basically you can see this has a little trickle coming down it. There's Devil's Club up there. It's obviously a seep, and you can see how this material has slumped into the ditch here and filled the ditch in. I'm sure in the winter when the rains were really heavy, this had a lot more water flowing into it. You can see some of the material here. It is very fine material, sediment, if you will, even. And And you can see in some areas this compacted glacial till that I've been talking about. It's here, it's underneath the material there that slumps down into this ditch. It's all along, you can imagine there's a lens of this kind of below, about 2 meters or so of soil that we have here. Here's more of it. This has been a little bit more weathered here, this stuff here, and it's so it's not as hard, and you know, because it's starting to break apart here, but it is very, very tough for roots to even penetrate this. You know, and if you can imagine, even, you know, water is definitely not penetrating through this, at least at a very, very, very slow rate. And so that buildup of water on top of this glacial, compacted glacial till material creates, you know, water acts as basically kind of a lubricant with the, you know, 2 meters of sandy and gravelly, cobbly, well drained, you know, glacial soils that are very typical of this area and the Pacific Northwest. Even with that compacted glacial till 2 meters below it, you can imagine once the weight, you know, starts bearing on that soil in that area, and if there's not enough roots and things to hold it together, and then just gravity, it's going to eventually slump off, like we've got a slump here. And then this one's kind of another one here that actually looks like it had some stream, you know, like maybe there's another seep up there that doesn't have Devil's Club around it, or this one over here also impacted this. You can actually see on this one, it looks more like, now that I'm looking at it closer, those almost look like machine ruts basically. And so what's happened here is the machine went up there, probably the feller buncher went up there, so we've got this rutting, and what they should have done is basically kind of fluffed up this area and gotten rid of this kind of channel that they've created here. And unfortunately, it's put material into our ditch because of the, you know, just even surface water runoff has caused this, and we've created kind of a little stream here when it's raining, and it's caused this part of the ditch to fill in. But if I continue to walk down here, you can kind of see that lens of compacted till material and sediments is still here. It's and you know, we still have a meter or two of soil above it. You know, here's a great example of it in here as well. Again, it's like starting to weather on the edges here because of the amount of moisture that's getting into it. Before this was cut, it was much stronger material, more cemented. But this is what happens when you let water and oxygen you know, hit this material. It'll eventually start to weather it quicker, if you can imagine, than if it were to be buried. And so here, you know, we've got, this is the major issue here that I want to point out too, that, you know, this slump here isn't caused from ruts. This one was caused more from the material here, this compacted glacial till with a couple meters of soil above it. And if we come up here, you can see we've got, you know, our O horizon. We've got a little bit of an A horizon in here as well. Some darker materials where the roots come down. And then we get into this B horizon, this B1 horizon. You know, it's got shadows in there, but it's a little reddish brown, typical. Then we get into this B2 horizon, which you can see, you know, it's got quite a bit more structure to it. There's some root channels in there, you know, where we've got organics being broken down, and you know, because we've got oxygen around those roots, and so that's a site for you know, where we get redox reactions, but also just breaking down the organic matter, and also probably getting some manganese weathering out of this rock as well. And speaking of rock, it's full of this kind of this glacial cobble. You can see these big massive roots from one of these stumps up here. Might have been removed. I'd expect it to be a little closer, but it could be further away. And then we get down into more of a, I don't know, B3 and into the C of that compacted glacial till material, which is basically right here. I've covered it up with the above horizons. Let me clear it off here. You can see it's this just impenetrable till. And so, like I was saying, you get this sandy coarse material on top of this compacted glacial till material that again has been weathered due to exposure here, but you can clearly see it's a nice lens of material. This soil takes up moisture, and then with enough moisture under the right conditions, is just going to slump into our ditch here. And as you can see, the water no longer goes into the ditch, it's going into the road. It's actually soaking into the road, which then causes issues down in the future down the road. But because once the prism of this road starts to get wet, it's going to start to want to slump down, you know, with gravity, very similarly to what's going on here. You can imagine this road is sitting on top of probably another lens of compacted glacial till, and holding this water here within the road prism is just going to exacerbate the potential for this road to fail. So what I'm going to do here is just take my shovel and clean out this area here so we can get the water flowing again like it should be, and get it off the road. So great example, miniature landslide type of scenario going on here. And like I've been saying, we'll go see some larger scale landslides in the near future. Okay, so it just took me a few minutes here to basically open up this channel, and or at least try to. And as you can see, another little piece there just fell in and started blocking the channel that I put in there. But you can see there's no longer, or very little water running in on the road surface here now, which is good. But you know, this is what happens if you can imagine, again, on a larger scale, this is like a river, and you know, you can see there was a big rock there next to that dirt clod that kind of fell into the river, or a little river here now. And it had because it didn't have very much holding it on there, right? You know, imagine that as a impervious compacted glacial till, even on a smaller scale than this. And you can also see here where the water's eroded away, and a lot of the fine sediments, and so we're starting to see just the cobbles. That's, you know, also happening in a river system, and again, more slumping of this material off. But hopefully I have, as you can tell, there's quite a bit of water going in here right now, and we got quite a bit of water in this ditch still. The water is going to keep coming, and you can see how it's even pulling sediments and fine materials, you know, in this area here, starting to back drain in there. So this is kind of getting into how important water management is to soils and vice versa, and how, you know, kind of erosion works. And, you know, again, this is, imagine this as a miniature river that's going on here, and we've basically had a flood situation kind of, and a re-channelization of the river. And so hopefully this is going to at least give us a chance to save this section of the road here until we can, from, you know, more inundation of water, until we can get like a mini excavator in here and clean this area out. It's a little too much for one person with a shovel. So we'll come back up here with a machine and fix this ditch up probably sometime this summer.